Coming up, with Artie Savia in Japan and a ton of player movement, who takes the Super Rugby crown in 2026? What should we look forward to in this coming season? Another title for the Crusaders, big changes for my Highlanders, new dominance from the Aussie teams. Another season is about to begin. Join the conversation. It's Super Rugby time, and this is the Scrum of the Earth. Hello, cheers, and welcome to the Scrum of the Earth podcast, your go-to for news, reviews, great interviews, and so much more, all about the world of rugby. My name is David Lawrence. I'm an American rugby fan who follows the game wherever I can find it all over the globe. If you'd like to get in touch, I'm easy to find on all your socials, and you can always just drop an email to thescrumoftheearth@gmail.com. Well, as you have no doubt deduced, this is yet another bonus episode. This time, we are here to preview the upcoming Super Rugby season, which kicks off on Valentine's Day weekend. The 2026 season marks the 30th anniversary of this competition, which began as the Super 12 in 1996. And from everything I'm hearing, we can expect a heavy focus on heritage, with the league recently launching a search for an all-time Legends 15 to celebrate the history of the game. That could be a fun thing to get the listeners' input on, so keep an eye on our socials for ways you can join that discussion. So, what's new for 2026? Well, first of all, there have been a few format tweaks. Big surprise, because after all, this is rugby and they just can't help themselves. Last year, they concocted a playoff format that was so weird they had to make a video just to explain it, and still failed to do so. This year, it's still batty, but they improved a few small items. For instance, previously, the highest ranked loser from the so-called qualifying finals could still host a semifinal. In 2026, no, that lucky loser is locked into the fourth seed. That means if a top-seeded team loses their first playoff game, they must play away for the rest of the tournament. Adds pressure to the opening week of the finals, and that's a good move, but it, doesn't entirely remove the lunacy. Also, for the first time, the Super Round, which is round 11, April 24th through 26th, which, as always, is the weekend of ANZAC Day. That's going to move to Christchurch to celebrate the opening of the new One New Zealand Stadium. Side note for regular listeners, the term Super Round and the name One New Zealand Stadium are beautiful examples of what I've been saying for close to 5 years now on this show. Kiwis are terrible at naming things. Anyway, the three fixtures that weekend will feature Crusaders facing the Waratahs on Friday, and the Hurricanes versus Brumbies, and Blues versus Reds on Saturday. So, what should you be keeping an eye on as we start a new season? Well, first of all, the Blues, they've obviously been a powerhouse the last several years, and they have recruited top 14 star Peter Aki, who returns home to New Zealand. Head coach Vern Cotter is in the final year of his contract, so I'm reading that there's a potential sort of last dance narrative here. Another thing that jumped out for me was the Crusaders, who will be, they'll be trying to defend their, I think it's 140th Super Rugby title. I may not have those numbers exactly right. They're opening the season against the Highlanders in a classic Southern derby. For those of you who don't know, I guess I already kind of alluded to it, the Highlanders were the first team I ever followed, so this is going to be the perfect way to set the stage for all the futility that will follow. Anyway, what else do we fancy this year? Well, across the ditch with Dan McKellar taking over the Waratahs and Les Kiss leading the Reds with new captain Fraser McWright. There's a lot of buzz about whether an Aussie side can finally, break that New Zealand dominance. Of course, I've heard similar things the last 2 seasons in a row, so I'm going to go ahead and file that one in the I'll believe it when I see it folder. And, anyway, the prospect is still exciting. Also, got a couple smaller venues hosting matches this year. The Western Force, they're making a bit of history this season by taking a home game to the northern suburbs. Instead of their usual home at HBF Park, they'll be playing at HIF, Health Insurance Oval, within Arena Joondalup. This marks the first time a Super Rugby Pacific match will be played in Perth's northern corridor. The Force management explicitly targeted this area because the northern suburbs are a massive rugby heartland in Western Australia, largely due to the high expatriate population from the UK, South Africa, and New Zealand. Who knew? But, though, perhaps even better, the Fijian Drua, they are taking a match to Mba, to Govind Park. For the first time, that's going to be round 5. Mba is located in the northwestern coast of Fiji's main island and seats right around 9,000 fans. So since entering the competition in 2022, the Drua have played their home games in larger hubs like Suva or Lautoka, Moving a game to Mba is a huge deal for local fans who usually have to travel hours to see professional rugby. And, of course, if you've watched, the atmosphere in Fiji simply can't be beat. Moving on to some laws and tactics, I thought it was worth highlighting some differences between what we'll see this season in Super Rugby compared to other comps. For instance, in Super Rugby, if a match is tied after 80 minutes, you enter a 10-minute golden point period. The first team to score, try, penalty, or drop goal wins. In 2026, the team that scores the first try of the match gets to choose whether to kick off or receive if the game goes to extra time, replacing the old coin toss. Kind of cool. The reasoning is this rewards attacking intent from the very start of the game. Unlike traditional rugby, where you build phases to wear a team down, Golden Point becomes a territory at all costs game. Teams will often take a Hail Mary drop goal attempt as soon as they cross that 40-meter line because the risk of losing possession is higher than the risk of a missed kick. Additionally, coaches now often hold one sort of impact player or like a long range kicker, a Damian McKenzie type, on the bench until the 70th minute, specifically in case the game does go to Golden Point. You don't want your kicker having heavy legs in the 89th minute. So the most heavily criticized rule in the game is the 20-minute red card, the very mention of which tends to send people in the northern hemisphere into paroxysms. As I'm sure you all know, if a player receives a red card for unintentional foul play, they are sent off permanently, but the team can replace that player with a sub after 20 minutes. They keep mentioning that referees can still give a straight red card, but don't hold your breath. Finally, there is now a strict 60-second shot clock for conversions and penalties, down from 90 seconds. From the analysis I read, the reasoning is by forcing kickers to hurry, the game restarts faster, which in turn prevents, frankly, the props and the locks from getting their breath back. As a viewer, look for teams with high fitness levels like the Hurricanes or the Blues to use that shot clock rule to keep ball and play time high, specifically to exhaust teams like, for instance, the Brumbies, who prefer a structured, slower set piece game. I found a great quote that read, quote, "In Europe, the laws are about discipline and endurance. In the Pacific, the laws are about chaos and recovery. A red card isn't the end of the game. It's just the start of a 20-minute chess match," unquote. Compelling quote. I like that one, but I'm still on the fence, let's say. Okay. That was the administrative side of things, but I now want to dig into teams and then some players to watch. Will the Crusaders defend their most recent title? Several media outlets like The Roar are actually picking the Hurricanes. They're saying the Hurricanes might be the team to beat in 2026. Why? First of all, they have arguably the best sort of in list of the season, getting Jordan Barrett back from his sabbatical in Leinster. That's huge. But the signing of Walter Dearns, the 6'8" lock and Japan international, is being hailed as a masterstroke to fix their historical lineout issues. That would be nice. I mentioned being a Highlanders fan earlier. I have to say, I'm actually reading some pretty positive buzz for them this year. But once again, not holding my breath. Some good moves include signing 86 test Argentine enforcer Thomas Lavanini to add some much needed nastiness to the pack. And of course, we're also adding All Black veteran Angus Tauvao. On the other hand, quoting from the main Super Rugby website, quote, "Promising fullback Dylan Pledger has been ruled out of all rugby for the following year after a training ground incident that resulted in a complete rupture of his ACL. He's going to miss both the Super Rugby and NPC seasons. He's going to undergo surgery in the next month. On top of that, emerging fullback Finn Hurley, who missed much of last year's season due to a quadriceps injury, has suffered a foot sprain that's going to keep him out of action 6 to 8 weeks at the start of the 2026 campaign," unquote. The Dylan Pledger thing is really bad. But, 2 injuries with under a month before the start of the season, that is simply the most Highlanders thing I can even think of. Anyway, which teams might drop off a bit this season? I got a couple candidates for you. First of all, Mono Pacifica. It's going to be tough. They are likely to be in a difficult rebuilding phase, losing their talisman and captain Artie Savia, who's going to be on sabbatical in Japan. That leaves a giant hole in both their leadership and their back row cover. Counteracting that a little bit, they have signed Ngani Lomape, who's lightning in a bottle. But, obvious concerns about whether their forward pack can hold up without Artie's individual brilliance and leadership. Perhaps more surprisingly, While still a powerhouse, the Blues have seen a significant brain drain to the Northern Hemisphere and Japan. They lost the unfortunately named Harry Plummer to Claremont, Mark Talea to Toyota, Rico Ioane, who's on obviously a short-term loan to Leinster. They will be leaning heavily on Bowden Barrett and the return of Peter Aki to keep them in the top four. Okay, already mentioned players like Lomapi and Aki. It would be foolish to overlook some other signings, such as Lester Fainga Anuku, who's coming back from France to rejoin his former club, the Crusaders. Fainga Anuku is so good, and who knows what a difference that's going to make for the returning champs. But the shock move of the offseason obviously had to be Tane Edmed moving from the Waratahs to arch rival Brumbies, replacing Noah Lolesio and potentially shifting the Aussie balance of power. A couple of other players worth keeping tabs on. Wallace Atiti of the Chiefs, who after a massive 2025 is expected to be the dominant loose forward in the competition. One article I read touted him as the next Artie Savia. And, I love Wallace Atiti, but let's all take a second and just drink a big, tall glass of settle down juice. So I also finally I don't really know what to expect, having had my hope so mercilessly beaten out of me. But Andrew Newstubb, the All Blacks 7-star, he's making the full-time jump to 15s with my Highlanders. So we at the minimum could be looking for some fun highlight reels, if not victories. Final bit about the Lomape signing. After 3 years in Japan, the former All Black center is back and has set some serious goals. He was quoted as saying, quote, "One of the reasons I came back was to be part of the first Moana Pacifica team to win the competition. Why can't our culture and our people do something great in this competition? That's pretty inspiring and definitely motivating," unquote. Moana Pacifica, though, they lost 15 players over the offseason. But Lomape, he's being framed as the new cultural and physical anchor. Insider tip, watch to see if he switches international allegiance to Tonga later this year. One more quote that struck me as unintentionally funny, perhaps. After a stint with Toulon, Fainga Anuku, he's back in Christchurch, and coach Rob Penny said, "Lester is a huge asset. It felt like he hadn't left." I obviously know he meant that as a compliment, but it easily could be read the opposite way, like, "Hey, coach, I'm back." You left? Anyway, Super Rugby kicks off on Friday the 13th, ironically, with my Highlanders scheduled to get eviscerated. I mean, facing off against the reigning champs, followed by Taz versus Reds, and then our first Islander clash with the Drua, hosting Moana Pacifica in Lautoka. Blues Chiefs is on Saturday, Valentine's Day, followed by Western Force versus Brumbies, finishing off that first round. Super Rugby runs for 16 rounds before the weirdo playoffs. It might take another entire podcast to explain that. But this is a competition that is fast, furious, and full of excitement. If you're a rugby fan in the UK, I would urge you strongly to give Super Rugby a shot this year. It's a different beast than anything you'll find in the URC or the Prem. I guarantee you'll see some mind-blowing performances. Before we wrap this up, I hinted at the top that Super Rugby is going to be working on like a legendary 15. I think it's going to take the full season to complete. I thought it'd be fun to put out a few names for a legendary Highlander squad. So I'm going to be creating some polls and other things on social media to give you all the opportunity to add your voices to the conversation. In that vein, here are 4 names, and then a serious dark horse who would be in my Landers Legends. Aaron Smith. I mean, duh. It's the most obvious and I would say inarguable choice. He's the premier halfback of the modern era, the most capped Highlander with 185. Ben Smith, or as we like to say, Bin Smith, so-called Bender. I just learned his nickname is. I've never heard that in my life, and yesterday I learned his nickname was Bender. The hometown hero from Dunedin, unbelievably safe under the high ball, arguably the club's greatest ever fullback. Waisaki Naholo, the try-scoring record holder with 45 tries, his power and speed were the engine room of the 2015 title run. However, he then came over as a hired gun and played for New York with the sole purpose of knocking my Free Jacks out of the Eastern Conference Finals in the Major League Rugby, after which his team promptly folded, so I will frankly never forgive him. Anyway, who else do I got? You know what? I'm going to add Carl Heyman, widely considered to be one of the best tight head props in the world during his peak. And so my dark horse pick, though, I'm going to toss him in there. Limo Sapoanga. His points machine, he was a points machine in the 2015 championship winning side. I've always loved him, but his career didn't necessarily go the way people thought it would after the 2015 World Cup. I think he's fallen off most people's radar by this point. I'd be very curious to hear what all of you think. So reach out, comment online, get into the chat. I never, ever imagine my opinions are definitive. And I'm always keen to learn more. If you've got picks, let us know. So, to all of you across the globe, thank you so much for tuning in. Please do what you can to help spread the word. If you haven't yet, get yourself into Super Rugby. It's an amazing competition and you will love it. In the meantime, cheers. Talk to you soon and be well.